Is this enough light here?
You look great.
I feel nervous.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this poetry reading with Verse Like Water, featuring Gregory. My name is Jeff Johnson. I serve on the English faculty here at Central Lakes College, and I want to begin by thanking our sponsors for this poetry event: Five Wings Arts Council, the Minnesota Legacy Fund, and Minnesota Public Radio. To get us going, I'll offer a very brief introduction in which I'll say some obvious things. One of the remarks I make to my students is that if you open your human hearts, the poets and writers I can't stop talking about could be your friends. And we'd all agree the very idea of friendship, first written about thoroughly by Cicero, has been tested across the last 2 very long years. The calamities of the pandemic seem endless, and the suffering is prismatic, and being in relationship with one another has been hard. Greg, you and I shared some curmudgeonly lamentations about this a few days ago, but after that hour-long conversation, I felt your friendship. In fact, I felt brotherhood. We are brothers in poetry, brother educators, brother husbands, brother fathers, and brother citizens in this world of green and blue, the same one that Gabriel Garcia Marquez called the planet of misfortune. Gregory, you understand more profoundly than anyone what the word brother signs and signifies, and maybe we'll hear a little about that today. Though there seems to be a break in the clouds, we remain masked at the State College. But in spite of that, I could see in the eyes of my students this past week joy, wonder, and love as I shared your poems. And these things can be found in every line of verse you've ever dreamed. From my heart, I thank you for being part of our Verse Like Water series and for making all the poems that fill these books, poems that have only one topic, which is beauty. Zoom friends and home viewers now and in the future, let's give a warm, implied Minnesota welcome to the American poet Gregory Orr. Take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. This is very exciting. This is my first Zoom reading, and already I'm looking wrong. Do what I can. The reading I'm going to do today is essentially culled from this book, which is not yet out. There it is. That's the book. It's called Selected Books of the Beloved. Copper Canyon will bring it out this summer. And it's about 550 untitled lyrics. I'm going to read the whole book. Wrong. No, I'm actually just going to read a group of poems from it, selection from, try and arc through this kind of story. What is the story? For me, these poems represent a kind of turning point in my life as a writer, and in ways I'm not really prepared to say too much about, except that about 20 years ago, I woke with a phrase in my head, spoken to me, I guess, out of a dream. It said, the voice said, "The book that is the resurrection of the body of the beloved, which is the world." And I knew what that phrase, cryptic though it might seem to you, I knew what it meant. I knew what each of the elements were and how they fit together. And I knew it in the way that you want to know it as a poet, which is to say, I started writing poems to really understand what that meant. But what I knew was that the book, to me, was this giant anthology of all the lyric poems and songs that have ever been written in whatever time, whatever culture. And they're all gathered together into this cosmic jukebox the size of the moon, called the book. And what are they there for? They're there to witness what it is to be human in this world. What form does that being human take for me? It takes the form of the beloved, of a relationship with some other creature or place or thing or person who brings you into the world through love and reciprocity, the loving and the being loved. But this being the world as it is, that love has to acknowledge the inevitability of loss, death, whatever, the price that we pay for living in time. What I felt in this story of the book was that there were two kinds of resurrections of the beloved going on. One was to be resurrected into poems and songs, to be brought back. Wordsworth somewhere talks about how poets have a tendency to treat the absent as if it was present. And someone else says somewhere, the language of poetry summons into being. So one of the resurrections, it seems to me, that happens in poetry and song is that bringing the beloved back. But another part of it, the beloved, which is the world, another part of it is that with the loss of a beloved, the principle of love is challenged, even maybe negated for a while, but it can reappear in our lives. And when it does, it's as if the beloved reappeared as some other creature or thing or person. The possibility of loving as a principle persists past that. Ultimately, what we recognize, it seems to me, is that the beloved is the world in its entirety, this world we inhabit. And that's a lot of talk. And of course, talk doesn't mean much until you, if you're a poet, it's cheap. Poems are what matter. I'm going to start reading some poems about the relationship between the beloved and the self, and then we'll move toward loss and more toward the book. None of the poems have titles. They're pretty simple. And so we begin. Even before speech revealed your secret, there was looking. Even before song that gave you away, there was gazing. The beloved felt your eyes upon her. He dimly understood why you looked at him that way. Speech of the eyes, the stare and the glimpse, the glance that lingers. This poem begins with a pun that's not available to you, but it's the eye of the beloved, the organ of perception, and the I as a personal pronoun of the self. Her eye and my eye, her gazing creates me. His voice in my ear, I'm seized by hearing. How because of the beloved, I come into being. Under her touch, all of me shudders. Hoarding your joys and despairs, as if they were clothes you bought but feared to wear. Look, hoarding your joys and despairs as if they were clothes you bought but never wore. Look at this bright shirt, a possibility you glimpsed but feared to seize. The beloved is waiting. You have a date. Put on that shirt before it fades. It's all far too large and various for us to take in. We'd burst apart if we tried. Narrowed door of desire that is the beloved's body. We'll enter the world through her or him. When we were young, we feared she would never come. Even then, we felt his loss, felt it as lack, as longing. We never thought how lucky we were to have it all before us. We dreamed the beloved's caress. We squirmed and tossed in our beds, imagining pleasure. A smile on the face of the beloved, and we caused it. Never again having to ask the universe if we have a purpose. Settled forever the question of our worth. So, who will give first and who will give most? My bold phrasing pleases me. I think it proves I'm in charge and can sharply bargain over what parts I still control. To my surprise, he simply insists I hold nothing back. Her only request, I surrender all I possess. With your embrace, you chose each other, which is to choose death and all that comes before it, sufferings and joys and infinite unintended harms. Large choice for such small arms. Reciprocity, that's where it starts. Not something given selflessly or grabbed without regard. The free exchange, caress begetting caress, gaze answering gaze. Across what gulfs, voice responding to voice, as poem responds to poem. If to say it once and once only, then still to say yes. And say it complete. Say it as if the word filled the whole moment with its absolute saying. Later for but, later for if. Now only the single syllable that is the beloved, that is the world. For such a journey, maps are useless. Physical distance, the least of it. Between one heart and the other, a short road and a long path. Getting lost, what's wrong with that? Voice of the beloved, searching me out. seeking me, speaking me, speaking herself first, speaking his own being in order to awaken mine. Lots of sorrow and a little joy. Lots of joy and only a little bit of sorrow. Who can know the formula beforehand? We don't get to watch as it's mixed. No one tells us what's in it. We lift it to our lips. Azure elixir that burns our throats to crystal. I dreamed she'd arrive by just sashaying in through my senses. But for someone like me, love couldn't enter until I was broken all the way to the center. Right here, the blow fell, a sledgehammer against a wall. And so a ragged door was made, and the beloved came to dwell. It helps if the plucking the daisy phenomena is still an active part of human interaction. She loves me not, but here we go. There's the daisy, white petals and a plush yellow center. And so we begin our anxious interrogation. She loves me not. Plucking it bare like a plump chicken we plan to cook. Daisy comes from day's eye, the sun, a flower as metaphor for the world's splendor. The beloved shining on us all the time, and us with our silly questions. Hold off, rain. Of course, my garden craves water, but the peonies are in full blossom. If you fall now, their petals will be scattered. Wait a day. Let them feel the pure joy of opening. Fall tomorrow. Then you can show them love is also a shattering. To learn by heart is to learn by hurt. Grief inscribing its wisdom in the soft tissue. Song you sing, poem you are. Finger moving, precise as a phonograph needle along the groove of scar. Moving into loss here. When the coffin was closed and the lid screwed down, when it was fed into the furnace and flames consumed it, your eyes were useless. What tears could put out that fire? And so you shut them Let the lids of your eyes close over the beloved's body. For a while now, darkness and what you see will be inside you. Love without loss, hard to measure. How can we test its depth? Easy enough to cherish what's always there. So easy we forget to bother. But what if love only starts when the heart stops? Stops and begins again on the other side of loss. What's over is over. No sure way to measure either grief or pleasure. We'll never know whether we took more than we gave. We let death take him without a word of protest. None of us spoke up, afraid to make a ruckus, afraid death might notice us. We didn't dance or weep or scream our grief. We let the beloved go without a song or poem, and that diminished us. Sorrow makes children of us all, Emerson wrote when his young son died. The wisest knows nothing. And grown Tennyson became a child crying in the night, a child crying for the light, and with no language but a cry. Words written by those who were lost, given to us, paths in the dark. When the beloved died, our world was destroyed. The one we made by placing him or her at the center. If we're patient and lucky, we might enter another beyond what we knew or wanted. One of risk and feeling. One where nothing under us will ever again be steady. And even to stand, we'll need to learn to dance. How easy to give up hope. How easy to draw death over you like a black cloak. Cover your face, your eyes. Stand there like a dead tree. I did that, claiming it was penance, claiming I was sorry I was alive after the beloved died. Who was I fooling? No one demanded I act that way. Least of all the ones I loved, who longed to live again and could not unless I uttered their names, unless I told their stories, unless I felt in my own bones how much they loved the world. Not to make loss beautiful, but to make loss the place where beauty starts, where the heart understands for the first time the nature of its journey. Love, yes, the body of the beloved as the gift bestowed, but only temporarily, given freely, but now to be earned, given without thought, and now loss has made us thoughtful. In the Navajo origin story, it began with weeping and turned into song. One of us was lost. That's how it started. It began as weeping and turned into song. And according to the Maori, there's a way of grieving in which a person's tears are matched like rhymed couplets in the West. And words emerge from those paired tears or merge with them. They call it weeping with meaning. It's something only humans do. The poems we love, what are they made of? Nothing. Yet when we recite them, our voice climbs the lines as if they were stairs made of air in a house made of breath. Structure invisible as death, a house made of breath, stairs that are nothing but air. Yet each so solid, we can pause when we want to and stand there. Not many of them, it's true, but certain poems in an uncertain world. They bring us back always to the beloved whom we thought we'd lost. As surely as if the words led her by the hand, brought him before us. Certain poems in an uncertain world. Loss and loss and more loss. That's what the sea teaches. The need to stay nimble against the suck of receding waves, the sand disappearing under our feet. Here, where sea meets shore, the best of dancing floors. Shifting a bit here toward the notion of the book. This is just part of a poem. As an anthologist might gather all the poems and songs that matter into a single book, the book that is the resurrection of the body of the beloved, which is the world. The book said we were mortal. It didn't say we have to be morbid. The book said the beloved died, but also that she comes again, that he's reborn as words. The book said, everything perishes. The book said, that's why we sing. Poem begins and ends with a phrase in quotes. What is life? When you first hear that question, it echoes in your skull as if someone shouted in an empty cave. The same answer each time. The resurrection of the body of the beloved, which is the world. Every poem different, but telling the same story. And we've been gathering them in a book since writing began. And even before that, as songs or poems people memorized and recited aloud when someone asked, what is life? How easy to give up hope. How easy to, oh, I read that already. We'll read it again. Poem mentions Sappho, the ancient Greek poet, one of my heroes. When Sappho wrote, whatever one loves most is beautiful, she began the poems of heart's praise, which comprise the book of the body of the beloved, which is the world. Everything in the book flows from that single poem, or the countless others that say the same thing in other words, other ways. The river has a single song, which is itself. The tree has a song, the bird also. The heart knows all these songs and a million of its own. Neither the river nor the bird can write. The tree moves its branches against the sky all day as if it's thinking of inventing an alphabet. But nothing comes of it. So it's still up to us. We're supposed to bring them into the book, make a place for them in our poems. The world comes into the poem comes into the world. Reciprocity, it all comes down to that. As with lovers, when it's right, you can't tell who is kissing whom. Even the saddest poems have journeyed past death and been resurrected as words on a page. Death never stopped the simplest poem. Death starts them. Loss launches them out into the future, so they will someday wash ashore on the beautiful page of the book. Message scratched on a log or lodged in a bottle. I write to you from the world. Now the snow is falling even more than an hour ago. The pine in the backyard bows with the weight of it. 2 years ago, my father died what love we had, hidden under misery, weighed down with years of silence. And now, maybe the poem can free us. Maybe the poem can express the love and let the rest slide to the earth as the snow does now, freeing the tree of its burden. Sappho invented the word bittersweet. I think that's so cool. Poets do that. Bittersweet, bittersweet, Sappho's word. She made it up, the complex taste of love. First, your whole mouth shudders and chokes. Your tongue revolts. Then the sweetness bursts and floods. Fruit of love, bitter and sweet. Loss and restoration. We eat and we eat. Chatted about Blake once, since a Blake poem reference. I thought I was hunting for a poem. Hours spent leafing through dusty books, huge anthologies. And all the time, the poem was stalking me. Tiger burning in the forests of the night, eager to devour my heart. No, not my whole heart, only the rotten parts, only what needed to be renewed, only what needed. If deepest grief is hell, when the animal self wants to lie down in the dark and die also. If deepest grief is hell, then the world returning, not soon, not easily, must be heaven. The joke you laughed at must be heaven. Or the funny thing the cat did at its food dish. Whatever guides you back to the world. That dark so deep, the tiniest light will do. I put the beloved in a wooden coffin. The fire ate his body. The flames devoured her. I put the beloved in a poem or song, tucked it between 2 pages of the book. How bright the flames, all of me burning, all of me on fire and still whole. Calm down, calm down. But why calm down? When I'm dead and only a poem in the book, read by someone not yet born, then I'll be calm. Then I'll tell them in a quiet voice what a miracle it is to be alive. I won't shout and jump around. I'll whisper it in her ear. And if I'm lucky, she'll shout and jump around. Her heart will beat a little faster. occult power of the alphabet, how it combines and recombines into words that resurrect the beloved every time, breaking open the dry bones of each letter, seeking the secret of life that must be hidden inside. River inside the river, world within the world. All we have is words to reveal the rose that the rose obscures. Time is a wound that can't close. It flows, it flows. All that's begotten rots. It's not anything personal the world has against us. That's the way it goes. Tune we first heard in our mother's womb and never even asked if it was sad or happy because we knew it was true. That song on the jukebox, an emissary the beloved sent. It's only doing its two-part job. First, it breaks our heart. Then it promises never to mend it again. Some of you will be glad to know we're getting near the end. Praising all creation, praising the world. That's our job, to keep the sweet machine of it running as smoothly as it can. With words repairing where it breaks down, where it wears out, where it breaks down. With songs and poems keeping it going. With whispered endearments greasing its gears. How lucky we are that you can't sell a poem, that it has no value. Might as well give it away. That poem you love that saved your life, wasn't it given to you? If a peach leads you into the world, into an appreciation of its delights, how much more so the beloved? A morsel of peach meat, a single kiss, and you know pleasure has depths beyond measuring. All this not subject to loss, but certain of it, guaranteed to vanish. Therefore, more precious, therefore brought back by poems and songs. The mouth open as if to sing, as if to sink its brave teeth in a peach. To be alive, not just the carcass, but the spark. That's crudely put, but if we're not supposed to dance, Why all this music? I'm going to put that on my gravestone, although I don't plan to have one. How beautiful the beloved, whether garbed in mortal tatters or in her dress of everlastingness. Moon broken on the water, or moon still whole in the night sky. Squander it all, hold nothing back. The heart's a deep well, and when it's empty, it will fill again. A bit of joy, a dollop of longing, a tear or two for the salt, a drop of blood for lost love, a small bone to remind us of our final home. These are the main ingredients. Heirloom recipe for 1,000 poems, passed along, parent to child, then repeated again, down through generations. Feeds us still, fills us, sustains both brain and heart. More stores being built on the corner. More things to buy and sell. The beloved is lost. She can't be bought. He can't be sold. For the price of a poem, the beloved is yours again. If you can't afford that, write one of your own. Time to shut up. Voltaire said the secret of being boring is to say everything. And yet, I held back about love all those years, talking about death insistently, even as I was alive, talking about loss as if all was lost, as if the world did not return each morning, as if the beloved didn't long for us. No wonder I go on so. I go on so because of the wonder. Last two poems. Last two poems. I know now the beloved has no fixed abode, that each body she inhabits is only a temporary home, that she casts off forms as eagerly as lovers shed clothes. I accept that he is just passing through that flower or that stone. And yet it makes me dizzy, the way he hides in the flow of it, the way she shifts in fluid motions, becoming other things. I want to stop him, if only briefly. I want to lure her to the surface and catch her in this net of words. This is what was bequeathed us. This earth the beloved left, and leaving left to us. No other world but this one. Willows and the river and the factory with its black smokestacks. no other shore, only this bank on which the living gather. No meaning but what we find here, no purpose but what we make. That and the beloved's clear instructions turn me into song, sing me awake.
Gregory Orr, that was absolutely sensational. I cannot wait to get my hands on your next book of poetry, that new one, the big one. I have 4 people lined up to ask questions of you, but first I have a hope that one of our guests would just say a quick hello. Dr. Hera Charlier is secretly a microbiologist, and she has for some years now been an absolutely brilliant president of this college, and she's one of the greatest administrators I've ever worked for. Hera, do you just want to say a quick hi?
It's very kind of you, Jeff. I don't deserve that. Gregory, that was amazing. It really was. I'll have to be honest, and I've told Jeff this, that before I came to CLC, I didn't read a lot of poetry. It makes me think and it makes me feel. You actually brought a tear to my eye. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And while I wish you could be here in person, I loved watching you while you read, and we're very grateful that you shared so much with us. It's a true privilege. So welcome to Central Lakes College.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I wish I was there, but so happy that you enjoyed it.
Our first questioner needs no introduction. Adam Marcotte is one of the most gifted teachers at this college. Earlier this week, he pretended to make a mistake with reply to all button, which is a tactic I've seen him use occasionally to get conversations going with great writers. The happy consequence of that is that you guys have been talking about William Blake this week, and I'm just so happy about that. Adam, do something.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, that was an intentional mistake, Mr. Orr. I had every intention of everyone seeing the email that I sent you, and thank you for your forgiveness on that note. I have been thinking a lot about William Blake, and I so appreciated your reading today. And I now have a new thing to hang on the wall, which is getting lost. What's wrong with that? I think that really kind of sums up a lot of what we do in the classroom. So thank you for that gem. My question is kind of more, it's a little English major-y in the sense of for people who are English majors, we study entire periods and we look at literature as as a package, and we try to understand what the Victorians thought and what the Renaissance folks were curious about. Sure. And so one of the great things about this series is that we get to meet people like you who are living and breathing and making the art that will someday be consolidated into a paragraph in the Norton Anthology for American Literature. So my question is, what do you think they'll say about us?
Okay, I'm utterly clueless on that one. But I'll give a so reason for that cluelessness. When people ask me, and what contemporary poets do you read, and so on and so forth, you begin to get the problem that you could see in this collection as well, which is that I don't really know to what extent I am part of my historical moment or part of the world of contemporary poetry. All my heroes, Sappho, Tang Dynasty Chinese poets, Keats, Blake, Wordsworth, Whitman, Dickinson. We haven't got to the 20th century yet. And I feel as if, there's this kind of strange way in which they're alive to me. And, some of the poems and the ways of writing poems that happen now aren't as vital to me. It's curious. I think of something that this French writer and thinker Andre Malraux spoke about. He spoke about the museum without walls. And what he was thinking of then was a peculiar opportunity we have now in our contemporary world of putting things together that are separated by vast times and different cultures, different civilizations. He was thinking of physical things like sculpture and painting and stuff. But to me, it's also like bringing together poems and stuff. So I know I'm deeply embedded in my contemporary moment. And after all, what I'm describing as the book is really could in some way be done on the internet. If you could get 1,500 elves to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for 30 years, you could actually gather this book together. And so maybe, but I don't know diddly squat about that reduction of my moment in writing and our moment in writing to a paragraph, except that it breaks my heart.
Thank
You want
you.
everything, when you write, you want everything to expand. Now, of course, it has to contract in order to be taught.
Mm.
You have to contract it to a door that people walk through. But what if they walk into the wrong room? The poems are rooms. The poems open up their spaces.
Thank you. I'll be one of the first ones in line for your new book. Congratulations on that. And thanks again for coming.
Sorry about the answer that's all over the map, but not an answer. That's the way I talk and think, if think you call it. Anything else? Anyone else?
Gregory, one of the reasons I'm having the time of my life teaching at Central Lakes College is because I have so many wonderful students that come from all walks of life. Your second questioner is one of my older students. His name is Nick. And Nick Wink put in 20 years. He retired from the Navy. He has circled back to college, and he is finding himself discovering how transformative poetry really can be. I credit Sophocles with that. Nick. You got to unmute, bro.
Oh, yep. I just unmuted myself. There's an extra prompt on there I didn't realize. So, yeah, just first and foremost, I want to thank you very much for the reading. This is the first poetry reading that I've ever been any part of or listened to, and so many great lines that resonate. Just it was wonderful. And for me, I guess as far as my question goes, I'm kind of curious about how the method behind when you come up with lines. Like, is it something where you decide you're going to give yourself a few hours today and you're going to sit down and just sort of think about life, or is it more that something happens at a moment and you're like, oh, I think I need to write about that. Maybe you have to grab a notebook and do it right away, or if it's something that you just do at a later date. Like, what is some of the process before the actual lines that you just gave us? That's my question.
Sure. Good question. And probably every poet has a different answer. My answer goes something like this. I write every day, same time every day, in the mornings, get up, coffee. Used to open a notebook back in the old days. Now I open the laptop. I write for 4 or 5 hours. I rewrite. I love to rewrite. I do it I write, 7 days a week. So there's a whole kind of flowing process going on and a discipline. What do I write about? I've never been able to write about a subject. I think I'll write about this. I mean, if you can do that, it's like going to be essays or maybe a novel. For me, something has to happen first. Sometimes poets talk about it as a kind of a given. You hear a phrase or you hear a rhythm even, although I don't know how you can hear a rhythm without words, but some people swear they hear a rhythm before they hear words. And the thing that you might have noticed somewhat in those poems is that I'm a little crazy about language, and that's a sign of a poet rather than, say, a fiction writer who's crazy about the world and uses languages to talk about it, describe it. What language and poetry seems to me to do is it creates worlds. And so the language itself is this mysterious, powerful thing that like just kind of guides you somewhere. And then you write, you follow that path, and then you look at it the next day and you realize it's garbage. So then you have to rewrite it and rewrite it. And for instance, these poems I write, I rewrite them about 300 or 400 times. It's just, that's because I like to do that, because they're no good when they start often. But so when I talk about occult power of the alphabet, breaking open the dry bones of each letter, I think that's from Isaiah or something. It's from the Bible. But there's something magic in language that poets feel. Language isn't descriptive, it's creative. And so, it just creates these worlds. You hope it creates a world for the reader. I hope it evokes some world or some felt, vivid thing. But for you yourself, you have to, as a poet, you have to feel that first. And I can remember the first time I ever wrote a poem in high school, and God bless the teacher who encouraged us to write. I wrote this poem that just made up this situation. In the poem, I was, standing on a rock by the ocean. In reality, I was just outside on the playground at school in the middle of the Hudson Valley. So what I discovered was that language can create reality. You know what I mean? And that is one of the reasons that it can get toward heart mysteries that are hidden inside you, because it pulls them out and it gives them form. It gives them form of language, the form of the poem. And that's so strange. I can see from your expression that I'm not getting it back across completely, but.
No, I get it. I understand. It's just, it's really big, I guess. And when I listen to some of your lines, I can tell at least some of it. It sounds like it's almost a picture from your life. Like it's almost like a little snippet of like an experience or whatever. The one that really resonated with when you were talking about the snow that was on a tree and how it, I could get that visual just so clearly. And another one that I read a day or two ago, I think it's called Memorial Day, where you're talking about Memorial Day and about some honors being rendered and stuff. I could see that. That was like, it felt like an exact snippet of your life. And I just wondered if it was something that that instantly clicked in your head that I need to write about this.
Yeah. Well, don't forget when I began this. Well, of course you've forgotten it. And I'm seeing this shaft of sunlight on my nose. It must look a little weird. He's put on his clone nose now. The poems I read are from the last 20 years, and they mark a real shift for me. Memorial Day that you mentioned is an earlier poem. I very much, describing the world, trying to describe often crisis moments in the world. But the poems that I'm writing now, the poems I read, are closer to kind of incantations. For instance, you've noticed that there are many, many phrases and words get repeated again and again. Well, in a certain kind of poetry, that's a sign of bad poetry, And then in the world of magical language, the kind you hear, prayers in church and stuff, incantation is part of the process of evoking, in this case, evoking emotions more than describing the world accurately. I feel a kind of freedom in poetry that I never felt when I tried to write prose. When I was a kid, trying to write. I knew writing was the only way I was going to stay alive. Whenever I wrote a short story, the main character committed suicide at the end of the story. Now, that was a sign to me that prose was not the way to go, because I felt trapped. In poetry, I feel a kind of liberation, release, transcendence. And that has something to do with the magic of language. And if I describe the world as it is too carefully, I start to feel trapped. And then the poem will feel trapped, and then we're all unhappy.
I got it. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Nick. Two more questions. Greg, for the last 10 years, over 30 literary events have been funded via grants, either at the regional, state, or federal, hopefully federal level next. And those grant applications and the funding goes through our foundation. And my partner in poetry there is one of the most delightful people I've met in all my days. And that's our foundation director, Kate Adornato. And Kate, ask a question.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful reading, and I really enjoyed it, Gregory, especially on this beautiful Friday from Florida. I have a quick question. In this chapter of my life, I have 2 young children, 2 and 6, and I'm just wondering what method would you suggest to get them involved or to get all children involved in poetry?
Wow. I guess, not going to have an answer here, but I'll say something anyway. Children have imagination. Honoring that imagination when it manifests itself as things they say or see or think or imagine, I would suspect that would be a kind of wonderful way of nurturing both an affirmation of that person in their own being, but also giving them a sense that you welcome what's inside them, be it strange or foolish or, depressing or whatever it might be. I have a grandson now, and I'm very lucky. My son-in-law keeps a kind of a journal, a weekly journal, which he sends us, of goofy and wonderful things that Silas, my grandson, says. And it's clear that that they're fascinated, and you can't not be because children say these amazing things and see the world in amazing ways. You can't, and to be cherishing that, to be preserving it and sharing it with us is really quite amazing. And it augurs well for Silas's future, knowing that odd things and silly things that he says are honored and responded to. Just a guess.
Thank you, Kate. One more question, Greg. Like we were talking about earlier, you and I have served thousands of students. And in the years, I've noticed a few students have the heart of a lyric poet. And that is definitely true of one of the greatest students I've ever had, Naomi Ringhand. Her camera is not functioning, but you'll be able to hear her voice. Naomi, I'm so glad you're here. Bring us home.
Thank you. Gregory, thank you so much for this past hour. It's just been a gift for me to receive and be moved by your words. And throughout this reading, you've held together things that I would normally have expected to be in tension with each other. You talk about the dying and the rising, and beauty and sorrow, and the being broken all the way to the center, and also this communion of looking, that is the gaze that answers the gaze. And words are somehow the path between these things. They're what resurrects the beloved. And you talked about this a little in response to Nick's question, but I'm wondering how can the beauty and power of poetry answer the suffering of the world? Or how have you experienced that resurrection in your life and in your work?
how could it answer the suffering in the sense of solve it? No. How can it respond to it? It does. That's one of the places that poetry comes from, responding. Not, this is a stupid mistake about lyric poets, not just the poet's own suffering, but the poet's awareness of suffering in the world and the awareness that we all participate in that one way or another. I mean, for one thing, we all participate, in the awareness of mortality, but also in the experiences of suffering, whether they're minor or traumatic. I mean, what we've never talked about here is that a lot of my impulse to write poetry came from early traumas that I had to learn to speak in order to live. I was responsible at the age of 12 for killing a younger brother in a hunting accident. And my mother died when I was 14, died overnight. And my father was a great guy, but he was also a drug addict and so on and so forth. And so, these are my on the body experiences of trauma and suffering, and poetry helped me to live. So you can only hope it might help other people to try to speak honestly and effectively about either your own experiences, and that could be very descriptive of your experiences. As Nick mentioned, Memorial Day is a very clear description of a Memorial Day celebration in a small town, which is where I grew up, or using some other language to try to speak about these mysteries, try to, obviously I'm trying to speak about them through this language of the book and the beloved and the world. Yeah, and I've sort of, I'm thinking here about Keats, and he's got a poem where he asks himself, what am I doing? Or actually he gets challenged in a poem. This goddess challenges him and says, you're a jerk. What are you doing here? He says, you're a dreamer. And a dreamer venoms all his days and bears more woe than all his sins deserve. In other words, you're a miserable cuss. You're totally self-involved. And he says, the goddess says, you're a dreamer. And he says, I want to be a poet. And she says, oh, a poet, that's the opposite. The poet pours out a balm upon the world. The poet is a physician. There's something healing about poetry. And apparently it's easy to confuse a dreamer and a poet. And I know a lot of poets who are really dreamers, but they want to be poets. And I know a lot of poets who, well, anyway, never mind. But Auden says about Yeats, he said, mad Ireland hurts you into song. There's something that hurts us into writing, but there's also some sense that language and rhythmic language in poetry transforms suffering into something healing, transforms anguish, transforms confusion. And I certainly feel, I know I was saved by certain poems I heard or read when I was young. And I also know that the process of writing feels healing to me. Not that everyone is ever healed. Healing is not, to be healed is not part of the human condition as far as I know. But, well, there we go. But we still go to the doctor. We still need the physicians who give us balms. Balms. That's a word we don't use anymore. It's kind of
Naomi,
nice.
thank you, Naomi. Gregor, on behalf of everyone, I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. We set Verse Like Water history today in several ways. I don't think I've ever had a poetry reading go this long at this college anyway. You caught Merwin. I've never had a poetry reading where we got the privilege of hearing so many poems. And in that way, you triumphed over the Jay Seshadri. I've also never hosted a poetry reading in a blizzard. We have a 50-mile-an-hour wind going. Every school in central Minnesota here has shuttered, including this college 15 minutes ago.
Wow.
And good thing I've got a half-ton truck. Blessings on you for being part of my series. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks. I hope I didn't read too long.
No, somebody pinch me.
Anybody gets caught in a blizzard, sue me. Or don't. Please don't. Hey.
All right. Farewell, my friend. Zoom wave, everybody.
Thank you so much for your hospitality and be safe.
I'm good. Would you send me your address? Because I want to send that book to you for a signature, okay? Whenever it comes out. All right,
Absolutely.
bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Be well.
You too.
Thanks again, sir.